It was exactly 10 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday morning when I realized 22 years of loyalty meant absolutely nothing. I was sitting in the main executive boardroom on the top floor. The room was beautiful, filled with expensive glass tables and modern leather chairs. 12 people sat around that table, including every vice president and board member in the company. At the head of the table stood Marcus Thorne. Marcus was only 34 years old. He was our new CEO, a polished golden boy with an expensive suit, a perfect haircut, and a brand new MBA from a top university. He looked like a man who had never worked a real day in his life, but he knew how to talk. Right now, he was looking directly at me, and his face was red with anger. There was a minor delay in our legacy system integration. It was a tiny technical glitch that my team was already fixing, a normal part of running a massive logistics enterprise. But Marcus did not care about reality. He cared about optics. He raised his hand, pointed a sharp finger across the room, and let out a cold laugh. Then he said the words that I will never forget. "Julian, your department is a black hole, and you are completely useless to the future of this company. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe to join our community. I share real workplace stories every day for anyone who believes quiet competence should always be respected." The room went dead silent. You could hear the rain hitting the glass windows behind him. Nobody moved. Nobody looked at me. The vice presidents suddenly found their notebooks very interesting. The emotional weight of those words hit me like a physical blow. 22 years. I had spent my entire adult life building the digital backbone of this firm. I knew every wire, every server, and every line of code. I had missed family dinners, worked through holidays, and stayed up for 48 hours straight during system updates. My name is Julian Vance, and I am 48 years old. I am a senior infrastructure director, a mature professional who believes in quiet competence. I did not yell back. I did not argue or make a scene. I kept my face perfectly still and my posture calm. Inside, however, something broke. A cold, clear realization washed over me. My deep institutional knowledge was completely invisible to these people. Marcus only saw an older man with a high salary who did not use fancy corporate buzzwords. Right there, in that heavy silence, I made a silent, firm decision. I was done. I would no longer protect a system or a leadership team that did not value me. I would do exactly what they asked. I would step back and let reality take its course. I walked out of that meeting and went back to my office. It was a small room tucked away in the back of the building, far from the beautiful glass boardroom. I sat down in my chair and took a deep breath. I'm a simple man. I have a mortgage to pay every month. My daughter is halfway through her university education, and her tuition is not cheap. For over 2 decades, my identity was tied to this company. I took a quiet pride in the massive, invisible digital infrastructure I had built from scratch. Most people in a company just clicked buttons and expected things to work. They did not know about the heavy lifting required behind the scenes. Right now, the company was preparing for its biggest moment in history. They were trying to close a $200 million merger deal with a global shipping conglomerate. This entire deal relied completely on a proprietary data bridge that we called the Apex pipeline. It was a complex system that connected our inventory, shipping data, and financial records directly with a new partner. Marcus and his new favorite employee, a polished young vice president named Chad, had been presenting slides about the Apex pipeline to the board for weeks. They took all the credit, telling everyone how ready the company was. But they completely ignored reality. They did not know that I single-handedly maintained the security handshakes and the old, legacy code patches that kept that pipeline alive. Without my manual adjustments, the pipeline would stop working. I leaned forward and looked at my computer screen. I checked my compensation file. I had not received a real raise in 4 years. Every time I asked, HR told me the budget was tight. Yet, just yesterday, I saw Marcus park a brand new 6-figure sports car in his reserved spot. The unfairness was loud and clear. As I looked closer at the system alerts, I noticed something very important. The Apex pipeline was scheduled for a mandatory, hard-coded security renewal weekend. It was an automatic safety feature built into the code years ago. It was set to trigger right during the final merger signing next weekend. To keep the pipeline open, someone had to manually bypass the old protocols and enter an encrypted master key. I was the only person alive who had that key. I was the only one who even knew the renewal weekend was coming. I looked at the calendar, then I looked at the empty hallway outside my door. If I was truly useless, then I had no business interfering with their automated systems. I decided right then to let the corporate process take its natural course. I would not say a word. I would not give an unprompted warning. I would simply do my job, sit on my hands, and let their perfect new world run itself. The pressure built quickly over the next 48 hours. On Thursday afternoon, the door to my office opened without a knock. Chad walked in, followed closely by a woman from the Human Resources Department. Chad was 28 years old, wore wireless earbuds like a permanent accessory, and smiled with too many teeth. He didn't sit down. Instead, he placed a thick blue folder on my desk and leaned against the doorframe. Marcus wanted me gone. The corporate plan was simple. They wanted to clear my senior-level salary off the books to make room for younger, cheaper tech hires who didn't understand infrastructure but knew how to look busy on Slack. The HR representative spoke in a flat, rehearsed voice. She offered me a minimal, insulting severance package, just 4 weeks of pay for 22 years of service. The condition was clear. I had to sign an immediate departure agreement and leave the property by Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. My wounded dignity turned into absolute, cold clarity. I didn't get angry, and I didn't beg for my job. I picked up a black pen and read through the paperwork very carefully. I noticed that the legal language completely released me from all future liability regarding the company's systems, but it lacked a transition clause. There was no requirement for me to train anyone, and no clause forcing me to hand over operational secrets. I looked up at Chad. Are you sure you don't want me to stay for a 2-week transition to hand over the infrastructure keys? I asked quietly. Chad let out a small, dismissive laugh. He adjusted his expensive watch and shook his head. Julian, let's be real. Our new automated cloud systems handle everything now anyway. We don't really need a human gatekeeper holding back our speed. Marcus wanted a fresh start before the big signing on Monday. I nodded slowly. I didn't utter a single word of warning about the upcoming Apex pipeline security renewal. I didn't mention that the automated cloud systems he loved so much would automatically lock down in less than 72 hours. I simply pressed the pen to the paper and signed my name, Julian Vance. On Friday afternoon, the clock finally struck 4 p.m. I packed my few personal belongings into a single cardboard box. There wasn't much: a framed photo of my daughter smiling at her high school graduation, an old engineering award from a decade ago that was covered in dust, and my favorite coffee mug. None of my colleagues came over to say goodbye. Chad had already sent an email out stating that I had chosen to pursue other opportunities effective immediately. I walked down the long, quiet hallway for the last time. The air felt lighter. When I stepped out into the parking lot, I felt a deep, heavy grief for the life's work I was leaving behind, but beneath that grief was an intense, quiet anticipation. I put the box in the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and started my car. I knew that the $200 million merger deal was set to close on Monday morning at exactly 9 a.m. They had a weekend of absolute silence ahead of them. It was Sunday night, and the world was completely quiet. I was sitting on my back porch, watching the crickets in the yard, and slowly drinking a warm cup of coffee. For 22 years, my phone would buzz every hour with system updates, server alerts, and late-night emergencies. Tonight, my phone lay face down on the wooden table, completely silent. I was finally experiencing a peace I hadn't felt in 2 decades. I watched the clock on my kitchen wall tick closer to midnight. Meanwhile, across town at the corporate headquarters, the digital silence was about to break. At exactly 12 a.m., the hard-coded security certificates for the Apex pipeline officially expired. The system did exactly what I had designed it to do years ago: protect the company's data from unauthorized access. Because I wasn't there to manually bypass the legacy protocols, type in the encrypted master keys, and verify the secure handshake, the entire data bridge went into automatic lockdown. It didn't crash. It safely locked its own doors from the inside to prevent a perceived cyber breach. The invisible friction immediately began turning into absolute panic. Automated alarm emails started flooding Chad's inbox, marked with bright red priority flags. By 12:15 a.m., our logistics servers began rejecting automated connection requests from the global shipping conglomerate systems. Out on the highways, trucking lines suddenly froze because the shipping manifests couldn't transfer across the locked data bridge. Warehouse digital dashboards across 3 states began flashing red, displaying fatal error codes. Chad was asleep, his phone likely on Do Not Disturb because he believed the automated cloud handled everything. He ignored the first 50 alerts. But by 3 a.m., the system failure was total. The central operational database was completely dead. The international partners in Europe were starting their business day, and when they tried to run their final pre-merger data audits, they were met with a blank screen. The enterprise logistics system was completely blind, and nobody in the building knew how to turn the lights back on. Monday morning arrived with a clear blue sky. For the first time in 22 years, I woke up naturally without an alarm clock, poured myself a cup of fresh coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table. At exactly 8:30 a.m., right on schedule, the quiet of my kitchen was broken. My cell phone began to vibrate violently against the hardwood counter. The screen showed Chad's name. I didn't pick it up. I simply took another sip of my coffee and watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Exactly 10 minutes later, at 8:40 a.m., the phone lit up again. This time, the caller ID read, Marcus Thorne. I let it ring for 3 full seconds, took a deep breath, and slid my thumb across the glass to answer. I kept my voice perfectly flat, calm, and professional. This is Julian. The tone on the other end of the line was frantic, filled with high-stakes drama and loud background noise. I could hear people arguing in the corporate boardroom. Marcus didn't say good morning. He didn't ask how I was doing. He was not apologizing yet. He was demanding. He used his full CEO authority, his voice strained and sharp. Julian, we have a catastrophic server glitch with the Apex pipeline. The entire logistics database is completely locked down. I need you to log in remotely and fix this issue immediately. The European investors are literally sitting in our main conference room right now. They are waiting to sign the $200 million merger papers at 9 o'clock, and their auditing team cannot verify a single piece of our operational data. Fix it now. I sat back in my chair, looking out the kitchen window at the morning sun. I spoke in clear, measured, simple sentences. Marcus, I cannot do that. If you recall our meeting last Tuesday, you looked me in the eye in front of the entire leadership team and told me that my department was a black hole. You told everyone that I was completely useless to the future of this company. On Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, Chad had me escorted from the building after I signed my termination paperwork. I am no longer an employee of your company. Marcus paused. I could hear him breathing heavily into the receiver. Then, his anger flared up again, and he tried to use fear. Listen to me, Julian. If this merger collapses because of a technical lockout, our legal team will sue you for everything you own. This is corporate sabotage. You are destroying a $200 million deal. I didn't blink. I kept my voice as cool as ice. Marcus, before I signed those papers, I explicitly asked Chad if he wanted a transition period to hand over the system infrastructure keys. He refused and told me that your new automated cloud systems handle everything. Furthermore, your own HR department drafted a full liability release. I am completely cleared of any operational issues. There is no legal ground here. You wanted me gone, and now I'm gone. The silence on the line was heavy. The panic on the other end became completely palpable as Marcus realized he had absolutely no leverage left. The tough corporate executive facade dropped completely. When he spoke again, his voice was cracking. His tone shifted instantly from anger to sheer desperation. Julian, please. I am begging you. Just come to the office. Let's talk. Please. I arrived at the corporate headquarters at exactly 11 a.m. I didn't wear my usual dark suit or formal tie. Instead, I walked through the heavy front glass doors wearing a casual jacket, blue jeans, and sneakers. The atmosphere inside the main lobby was pure chaos. It looked like a trading floor during a market crash. Phones were ringing off the hook at the reception desk. Customer service reps were sweating as they dealt with angry shipping clients, and tech support staff were running up and down the hallways with blank stares on their faces. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see the European investors. They were checking their watches, packing up their laptops, and openly talking about walking away from the deal due to systemic instability. Marcus was waiting for me near the elevators. His tie was undone, his expensive hair was completely messy, and his face was pale. Chad stood right behind him, looking absolutely terrified. They didn't say a word to the rest of the staff. They immediately pulled me into a small, private side office away from the investors. The emotional dynamics in the room were completely reversed. The young, polished NBA giants were now small boys looking for a lifeline. Marcus swallowed his pride, took a deep breath, and looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "Julian, the auditors say the data bridge is completely blocked from the inside. They think we've been hacked, but I know it's your system. What will it take for you to log into the pipeline right now, enter the master keys, and restore the data flow before these investors walk out the door at noon? Just tell me what you want." I didn't hesitate. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a simple, one-page independent consulting contract that I had drafted at my kitchen table that morning. I placed it flat on the desk between us. "The terms are very simple. Marcus," I said calmly. "First, my rate as an independent consultant is a flat $150,000 for 1 hour of work. That money must be paid upfront via an immediate, non-refundable wire transfer into my personal bank account. Second, before I touch a single keyboard, Chad must be fired immediately for gross operational negligence. He told HR that the systems didn't need human oversight, and his incompetence has cost you this deal." Chad's face turned bright red. He stepped forward, pointing an angry finger at me, shouting, "Marcus, you can't listen to this guy. This is extortion. He's crazy." Marcus looked at Chad, then he looked at the wall clock ticking closer to noon, and finally he looked back at the contract. He realized he was minutes away from watching a $200 million empire completely vanish over a petty insult. Marcus did not hesitate for long. He looked at Chad with cold, empty eyes and said, "Go pack your things, Chad. You are done here." Chad opened his mouth to argue, but the look on the CEO's face silenced him instantly. He turned around, his expensive shoes squeaking on the floor, and walked out of the room to face the exact public humiliation he had handed to me just days earlier. Marcus then pulled out his corporate phone, called the Treasury Department, and ordered the immediate upfront wire transfer of $150,000 to my personal bank account. I did not move. I did not touch a computer. I sat quietly in my chair, enjoying the cool comfort of the room while Marcus paced back and forth, checking his watch every 30 seconds. At exactly 11:42 a.m., my phone buzzed in my pocket with a bank alert. The wire transfer had cleared. The funds were safely in my account. Only then did I stand up and walk over to the central terminal in the corner of the office. The screen was covered in bright red error messages, flashing warning codes that looked like Greek to Marcus. I sat down, placed my fingers on the keyboard, and went to work. The process was simple for someone who knew the architecture. I didn't need to rewrite the system. I just needed to tell the truth to the machines. I typed in 3 specific lines of proprietary code to halt the automatic security lockdown. Then I opened my personal encrypted vault and entered my unique, grandfathered security keys. These are the master handshakes that prove the system was safe. I hit the enter key to bypass the expired legacy handshake. Within 4 minutes, the transformation was complete. The flashing red screens suddenly stopped. One by one, the monitors turned a beautiful, steady green. The Apex pipeline awakened from its sleep. Through the glass window, I could see the central office dashboard light up as massive streams of logistics data began to flow seamlessly across continents once again. Out in the main room, a cheer went up from the tech support staff. I looked through the glass walls of the main conference room. The European investors were staring at their tablets and laptops. The blank screens were gone, replaced by perfect, verifiable operational data. They looked at each other, smiled in satisfaction, and nodded. The lead investor picked up a heavy black pen, leaned forward, and signed the final papers for the $200 million merger deal. Marcus slumped into a nearby leather chair, completely exhausted. He looked at me with a mixture of intense relief and deep humility. He finally realized how fragile his entire digital empire actually was, and how completely reliant it had been on the mature, quiet man he had called useless. I stood up from the terminal, closed my personal vault, and picked up my copy of the signed consultant agreement. My hour of work was finished. I walked out of the executive suite and down the long hallway for the absolute last time. I passed by Chad, who was standing near the elevators holding a small cardboard box of his own, looking completely broken. I didn't say a word to him. I kept my posture straight and my head high as I walked out into the warm afternoon sun. I felt an incredible sense of relief and a clear conscience. I had spent 22 years protecting that company, but today I had finally protected myself. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my daughter. With a few clicks on my laptop, I used a portion of the $150,000 consultant fee to completely pay off the remaining balance on my home mortgage. Then, I transferred enough funds into her savings account to fully cover the rest of her university tuition and books. The heavy financial weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for years was gone in an instant. A week later, my phone rang again. It was Marcus. His voice was calm, and he spoke with absolute respect. He offered me a full-time position as the new chief technology officer of the newly merged global company, complete with a massive six-figure salary, stock options, and a seat on the board. He told me they needed someone with my exact institutional knowledge to guide them into the future. I took a moment, smiled quietly to myself, and politely declined the offer. I told him I would send him a list of qualified independent engineers who could run the pipeline under my remote supervision. But my days as a corporate employee were over. I have since started my own boutique infrastructure consulting firm. I only work 20 hours a week now, choosing my own clients and setting my own rates. I only work with leadership teams who respect operational truth and value experience over corporate buzzwords. My 22 years of loyalty didn't save me, but my undeniable competence did. If there is one lesson I learned from the glass boardroom, it is this: never let a company define your worth, and never protect a system that refuses to value the hands that built it. True security doesn't come from a corporate title. It comes from knowing your own value and being ready to walk away when they forget it.